My name is Kaylee and today's video will be a mini documentary piece on the greatest female pharaoh to have ever ruled over ancient Egypt, and honestly, my favorite woman from ancient times, Hatshepsut. She was one of the foremost noble ladies of ancient Egypt and her royal Horus name was Ma'at Kare, which roughly translates to Goddess of Truth is the life force of the sun god. This video is sponsored by mystories.com, but as always, more on the sponsor later in the video. Hatshepsut was born in the year 1507 BCE as the daughter of Pharaoh Thutmose I and his first royal wife Ahmose. Hatshepsut's father, Thutmose I, was the third pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, and he reigned over Egypt between 1506 and 1493 BCE. Although, a minority of scholars who use the chronology proposed by James Henry Breasted from 1906 actually date his reign from 1526 until 1513 BCE. But most Egyptologists use the chronology proposed by Ian Shaw in the year of 2000. This is because James Breasted had added a ruler in the 20th dynasty that further research showed did not actually exist. This changed the conventional chronology, and thus during the 18th dynasty there are two possible chronologies, although Shaw's chronology is used the most because it seems to be the most complete. These are not the only two proposed chronologies, there are actually quite a few. But why are there so many proposed chronologies, you may ask yourself? Well, the Egyptian chronologies are formed by the surviving king lists. But these king lists are either comprehensive but have significant gaps in the texts, like for instance the Turin king list, or they are textually complete but they fail to provide complete lists of rulers, like for instance the Abydos king list and the Palermo stone. And then there's the biblical bias of some scholars back in the 1800s. Of course, radiocarbon dating as well as the Thera eruption have been helpful in finding precise dates in the chronology. Since this is a mini documentary, I felt the need to share that tidbit of info. So as you can imagine, it's not up to me to dispute any of the dates of Thutmose I's reign. But generally speaking, using Shaw's chronology, it is accepted by the historians that he reigned from 1506 until 1493 BCE. So Thutmose I and Ahmose, his first royal wife, Hatshepsut's parents, had a total of 3 sons and 2 daughters together, so they had 5 children. But unfortunately, Hatshepsut's full siblings passed away before her father Thutmose I himself died. Her father Thutmose I did have a second wife, also known as a lesser wife. Her name was Mutnofret, and they had a son together named Thutmose II, who was born in 1510 BCE. So in order for Hatshepsut's brother Thutmose II to secure his kingship, because he was the son from a lesser wife and therefore not fully eligible for the throne, he had to marry his half-sister Hatshepsut, as she was a full royal. Hatshepsut's father Thutmose I was a strong pharaoh who made conquests into Nubia in the south and all the way up to the Euphrates in the northeast. Her father is credited to have erected large obelisks at Karnak Temple, and he is the pharaoh credited to have begun the tradition of the royal burials in the Valley of the Kings on the west bank of the Nile in Luxor. After Thutmose I passed away in 1493 BCE, Hatshepsut and her half-brother Thutmose II were married, and her half-brother became pharaoh and ruled over Egypt. Mother's Day is the perfect moment to celebrate the women who have shaped us. I was partially raised by my incredible grandmother, and if she were still with me today, she would have loved the book I created for her this Mother's Day with my stories. My Stories lets you or a loved one capture life stories through simple weekly email prompts. You just reply by email with your story, include any photos you want, and at the end, they turn it all into a beautiful full-color hardcover book. No tech experience needed. It's really that easy. So my book is called The History of Kaylee. And I shared insights and beautiful moments throughout my life that my grandmother would have cherished. But I also included stories that she never got to experience with me. Like the proudest moment of my life when I received my silver play button from YouTube after reaching 100,000 subscribers. As well as The day in my childhood I would love to experience again. Like sailing on the Grevelingenmeer with my grandpa and grandma. We sailed for about 6 weeks. And there was one day where we were on an island with wild fjords and other beautiful horses, and she was with me, and we had this incredible moment where one of the wild horses came up to me and I was able to pet it. That doesn't often happen with a wild horse, and she captured a photo of it. And I have that photo somewhere, but I recently just moved, so I put the photo of me right after she passed away and my YouTube channel taking off as the photo next to it, because she would not have experienced this, but we did experience this beautiful little story. While she may no longer be with me in person, I know she's with me in spirit. And this book became a way to celebrate her legacy, because Mother's Day is also about remembering the ones who shaped us, even if they're no longer here. My grandmother would be proud of our family for keeping our traditions, like our once-a-year family day, when 4 generations come together to do fun activities and share our stories. I will be bringing my book to our upcoming reunion, so her siblings, my great aunts and uncles, can read the stories I would have shared with her over the years. I'll even be giving them their own copies of The History of Kaylee, because this isn't just a book. It is the treasured moments I shared with her and a way to preserve her memory and for them to have a timeless keepsake of the legacy of their sister. So if you want to surprise a special woman in your life for this upcoming Mother's Day, may it be your mother, your wife, your grandmother, or your sister, order my stories today. This isn't just a book, it's a keepsake. A way to show love, appreciation, and curiosity for the life they've lived, and the stories still to come. Now is the perfect time. You can get 25% off when you order through the link in the description. Just click the tracking link, scan the QR code on screen, and use the code Kaylee25 at checkout. At the Karnak Temple in Luxor on the east bank of the Nile, Hatshepsut is depicted on a gateway on several relief scenes dating from Thutmose II's reign. She is depicted both with her husband, and she is depicted alone as well. So her half-brother Thutmose II was the 4th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt. He is generally thought to have reigned from 1493 until 1479 BCE. Again, the dates are disputed by some, but that's not the focus of this video, as these are the generally accepted dates for this dynasty when using Shaw's chronology, as I explained in the beginning. So there are a number of archaeologists who are of the belief that Hatshepsut was the real power behind her husband's and half-brother's reign. This has everything to do with similarities between the domestic and foreign politics during his rule and her rule after he passed away. Hatshepsut and Thutmose II had a daughter together by the name of Neferure. This was their only child. However, Thutmose II, apparently a lot like his father, had a lesser wife by the name of Iset before he died, and together with Iset he had a son who was given the name of Thutmose III. Hatshepsut's husband and half-brother, Thutmose II, actually seemed to have suffered from poor health, and he reigned over Egypt for only 14 years, which really isn't that long. Before he passed away, he proclaimed his son with his lesser wife Iset as his successor. But when he passed away, his son was only 2 years of age and therefore unfit to rule over the kingdom. So, as Hatshepsut was a full royal, and most likely already partially reigning the kingdom during her husband's reign due to his poor health, she dutifully acted as regent for his stepson/nephew Thutmose III. At first it seems like she was simply trying to avoid unrest in the kingdom during this period of co-regency, in hopes that no one else would try and take over the throne. But as the years passed, she started to behave less like an overseer to the kingdom and more like Egypt's rightful ruler. And by the time her stepson and nephew was around 9 years of age, she became the rightful ruler. We don't know why her role as co-regent became insufficient for their lineage to remain on the throne. And some Egyptologists in the past were of the belief that it was simply her ambition and her lust for power that drove her to become pharaoh. Yeah, deep sigh. Although, thankfully, most scholars nowadays are under the impression that the move of her becoming pharaoh most likely had been due to political crisis. possibly a threat from another branch of the royal family, and that Hatshepsut may have taken over power to rule the kingdom to secure the throne for her stepson and nephew, because, you know, that's the thing you do when you care about someone and want them to eventually become who they should be. So before Thutmose III reached maturity, she had already declared herself Pharaoh, and she had sent him away from the court to join the army. This is where he grew up and learned the ropes of warfare and leading armies and keeping his kingdom safe. Hatshepsut didn't send Thutmose III away simply because she didn't want him around. She actually made sure that Thutmose III learned how to be a great soldier, which honestly, back in the day of ancient Egypt, was of the utmost importance for a ruler of a nation and a kingdom as big and powerful as Egypt was in ancient times. We also need to keep in mind that back then, during the reign of Hatshepsut, it wasn't really an option for her to, step down when Thutmose III became of age. Because simply put, the moment you took on the attributes of kingship, that was it. You were revered as a god in the eyes of your people. It's not being a queen for a day or for however long it's needed, it's being a king as long as you live until the day you die. So you may be thinking, how was Hatshepsut able to convince the people to accept her as pharaoh? You might ask yourself this question. Well, in order for Hatshepsut to support her claim to the throne, she claimed that the god Amun had taken the form of her father and visited her mother. The god Amun then told her mother that Hatshepsut was the result of a divine union, and by doing this, Hatshepsut proclaimed herself to be the daughter of a god. She then further justified her claim to the throne by declaring that the god Amun-Ra had spoken to her, saying, "Welcome, my sweet daughter, my favorite, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Ma'at Kare, Hatshepsut. Thou art the king, taking possession of the two lands." And from this point onward, she started to refer to herself as Lady of the Two Lands, or as the female falcon. The falcon is represented at her mortuary complex, as you can see in the picture here. There used to be two beautiful falcons here on either side of the staircase leading up to the upper level of the temple. Unfortunately, only one remains. She further claimed that her father, Thutmose I, had made her his co-ruler and heir to the throne during his reign before her marriage to Thutmose II. Her chief steward, Senenmut, who had served under both her father and her husband, corroborated these stories. So there have been historians in the past that have suggested that Hatshepsut and Senenmut may have been lovers, but there's absolutely no evidence to support this claim, and in my personal opinion, this has been a very nasty way to try and discredit her, and it's an underestimation of Hatshepsut in the most vile form. These historians, for instance William C. Hayes, called Hatshepsut the vilest type of usurper. It's honestly ridiculous that male historians back in the day could not accept a female ruler and did everything in their power to diminish the accomplishments of one of Egypt's greatest pharaohs to have ever lived and ruled over the kingdom. And then there are some people in the past few years that have tried to push the narrative that Hatshepsut must have been transgender, because she started to dress in the attire of a king, wearing the fake metal beard just like her male pharaoh counterparts would have. And then again, many historians in the early 20th century interpreted this as an act of outrageous deception, that it was deviant behavior in what they viewed as her devious politics. What all these people seem to simply not grasp or understand is the fact that a pharaoh is dressed in a certain attire. And since almost all pharaohs were men, let's be honest, Hatshepsut had only been the second female pharaoh in the entire history of the Kingdom of Egypt, of course, she would dress in the correct pharaoh attire. I personally feel like she could not give two shits about wearing a fake metal beard. To her, that was just the way a pharaoh was supposed to dress. She didn't try to deceive anyone by pretending to be a man, and she for sure was not transgender or had transgender ideologies by dressing in a male attire. She was just dressing in the proper attire for a king of that kingdom. Because even though Hatshepsut may have dressed as a king, it was never her intention to pass herself off as a man. She never pretended to be a man. She called herself Her Majesty the King. the king being the pharaoh title. But she was and has always been a princess and a queen. To dismiss this as a serious attempt to pass herself off as a man is to misunderstand the Egyptian artistic convention, which showed things not as they were in real life, but as they should be in the eyes of the gods and all that is holy. By depicting herself as a traditional king, she ensured not only that she was seen that way, but that this is what she would become. Inscriptions on Hatshepsut's statues almost always contain an indication of her true gender, by using a title like Daughter of Ra or His Majesty herself. It's very obvious that she was just being a proper pharaoh. Early in her reign, Hatshepsut sent military campaigns into Nubia and Syria, but not being able to lead the troops herself, she decided to take the military out of the equation. Leading troops into battle was a role strictly reserved for men, and she did not want to change these rules. So instead of sending soldiers to war, she sent them on trading expeditions. Again, showing that she was not pretending to be a man or had transgender ideologies, because otherwise she would have led those armies. So under the reign of Hatshepsut, many trade routes were re-established that were disrupted in the 100 years under the Hyksos rule in Egypt that ended 4 decades before she was born. She launched a trade expedition into the fabled land of Punt, located somewhere along the southern shore of the Red Sea, a place where no Egyptian had been in approximately 500 years. 5 ships that were 21 meters, which equates to 70 feet, long, with several sails, manned with 210 sailors and 30 rowers, were sent on these trade missions. These expeditions returned with gold, ivory, exotic animals, including baboons and panthers and giraffes, and most notably, frankincense and 31 live myrrh trees in the baskets of their native soil. This was the first time in recorded history that a plant or tree was transported from a foreign land successfully for a transplant. These trees were then planted in the courts of her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari on the west bank of Luxor. So Hatshepsut would grind the charred frankincense into a coal eyeliner. This is the first recorded use of the resin in history. So the expedition into the land of Punt was depicted on the walls of a mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari. This depiction is famous for the realistic depiction of the queen of the land of Punt, Queen Ati. She is portrayed as quite tall, with large breasts, a thick bum, and rolls of fat on her body. Ati had excessive curvature of the lower spine, possibly caused by lordosis, which is an abnormal inward curvature of the lumbar spine. The mural displays the riches they brought back to Egypt after the trade mission ended. It shows scenes of the Puntites' village with conical huts made of reeds built on poles above the ground, which can be entered with ladders. This campaign was wildly successful and significantly increased her popularity and enhanced her reputation. So her rule has been perceived as relatively peaceful, and during her reign she was responsible for more building projects than any other pharaoh in history besides Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great. She also repaired a lot of the damage done by the invading Hyksos from Asia in the century before her birth. The Hyksos and their invasion of the Egyptian lands and all that occurred during that time will probably be the subject of a future video, if people are interested in seeing that. So let me know in the comments down below. So early on in Hatshepsut's reign, she ordered the construction of her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari. The ancient name of her temple was Djeser Djeseru, which translates to the most sacred of sacred places. Her temple was designed and constructed under the architect and royal steward Senenmut to serve for her posthumous worship and to honor the glory of Amun. The temple of Djeser Djeseru sits on top of 3 layered terraces. Each of these terraces are articulated by a double colonnade of square columns, except the northwest corner of the central terrace. The chapel is located in the northwest corner of this central terrace, and therefore it has proto-Doric columns. The 3-layer terraces reach a height of 29.5 meters, which equates to 97 feet tall, and are connected by long ramps. These ramps used to be surrounded by gardens with foreign plants like the myrrh and frankincense trees. So the location of the temple is important. In the valley basin of Deir el-Bahari, being surrounded by steep cliffs, built partially into the cliff face that rises above it, right next to the terrace-shaped mortuary temple of Pharaoh Mentuhotep II that was constructed around 2050 BCE. So the temple of Mentuhotep II was used as an inspiration to Djeser-Djeseru. The pillared galleries on either side of the ramp were similar to those of 2 successive levels of the temple of Mentuhotep II. The layering of Hatshepsut's mortuary temple is a classical Theban form, with the hypostyle hall, sun court, chapel, sanctuary, and the pylon. A pylon is the term for a monumental gateway of an Egyptian temple. It consists of 2 towers joined by an entrance in between. The entrance was generally half the size of the towers. The entrance to the sanctuary is beautifully adorned with hieroglyphs on the pillars. Above the doorway below the roof is the image of Wadjet, flanked on either side by 2 other long serpents. Wadjet was the goddess and protector of all Egypt after the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt. She's displayed on a carved relief you can see here as well, once surrounding the sun, or in other words Ra, with her head through an ankh, and once preceding the Horus hawk wearing the pshent, thus representing the pharaoh she protects. The ankh is also known as the key of life. I'm actually wearing one always. I bought it in Egypt while I was there. It is an ancient Egyptian symbol. It represents the word for life, and it's a symbol of life itself. It was commonly depicted held by ancient Egyptian deities or given by these deities to the pharaohs to represent their power to sustain life and revive human souls in the afterlife. One of the incredibly beautiful displays on the wall are of Hatshepsut making an offering to the god Horus. She is depicted as a male pharaoh, wearing the male attire, and to their left is an animal skin wound around a tall staff. This is a symbol of the god Osiris. On the northern part of the upper terrace is the solar worship complex located. It comprises an inner sanctuary dedicated to the god Anubis with an outer court. First excavated by the expedition of the Egypt Exploration Fund in 1893 under the direction of Edouard Naville. The sun altar was situated in the middle of the complex. This altar courtyard was open to the sunlight. The rays of the sun would touch the huge limestone altar every day. There was a shrine to the god Anubis in the eastern part of this solar complex. It was most likely not an essential part of the complex, but the exact function of this shrine has yet to be determined. This chapel does come with the first attestation of the text called King as the Sun Priest, which is an important theological tale that showed the significance of the role of the pharaoh as the heir and servant of the solar god Ra. Of course, it doesn't come as a surprise that the main deity worshipped in this solar complex was the god Amun-Ra, with important places being reserved for Ra-Horakhti and Atum-Amun, which are nothing more than different aspects and form of the sun god Ra. The statues and depictions at Djeser-Djeseru have been stolen or destroyed after her death, and the temple was once home to 2 statues of Osiris, a long avenue lined with sphinxes, and many sculptures of Pharaoh Hatshepsut sitting, standing, or kneeling. One Hatshepsut sphinx has been restored, bearing Hatshepsut's face on a sphinx body, and this sphinx has been placed back at the mortuary temple to show the tourists and visitors what the avenue of Hatshepsut sphinxes would have looked like. I actually took this photo of the restored Hatshepsut Sphinx when I visited the temple back in September of 2022. I do believe I heard talks about restoring more of the Hatshepsut Sphinxes in the future to fully recreate her original avenue of the Sphinxes, but I can't be 100% sure that this is actually the case. I may have misunderstood. So please don't come for me when it comes to this bit. So when I was actually at the mortuary temple, Djeser-Djeseru back in September of 2022, it was a really hot day, as per usual. It's Egypt, it's the middle of the desert, and it's situated very low in the country. So it's really, really hot out there. And sweat was actually dripping down my legs. So if you want to actually see this mortuary temple with your own eyes, but you don't want to stand in that type of heat, I would suggest going in December, January, or February, because the rest of the year it's going to be way too hot for you. So in the future I might create a deep dive for the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut. I wish to cover everything, but that would make this video way too long, and we have many more constructions to cover under the reign of Hatshepsut. So we are going to move on to the next. At the Karnak temple she had twin obelisks erected at the entrance to the temple, which were at the time the tallest in the world. One obelisk still stands as the tallest surviving ancient obelisk on Earth, and the other broke in two and has toppled. She had more monuments constructed in and around Karnak, although they have since been destroyed or any mention of her has been erased. Hatshepsut also restored the precinct of the mother goddess of Mut at Karnak in Luxor as well, but her cartouches have been erased and covered with Thutmose III's name. Chapelle Rouge, or in other words, the Red Chapel of Hatshepsut, was a religious shrine in ancient Egypt, originally constructed during the reign of the female pharaoh. It was demolished in antiquity and parts were used in other projects, but after its rediscovery in modern times, the chapel has been reconstructed in 1997 using the original materials. So the original location of this chapel is uncertain, and archaeologists have proposed two possibilities. One possible location is in the central court of the Temple of Amun at Karnak, and the other possible location is between the two erected obelisks at Karnak. You know, the one that broke and toppled, and the other one still stands. So the chapel is approximately 18 meters long and 6 meters wide and 5.5 meters in height. The upper portion of the chapel is made of red quartzite and the foundation is built from black diorite. It's most likely that Hatshepsut didn't complete the decorations within the chapel because the upper blocks show only Thutmose III, and the upper registers of the southern outer wall bear a dedicated inscription bearing only his name. These are signs that he was already pharaoh by that time. Many of the descriptions in the chapel describe events during the reign of Hatshepsut. Some of the blocks show Hatshepsut in the royal garb, running with the Apis bull between the markers of her Hatshepsut festival. Another scene depicted shows a pharaoh offering incense before two pavilions. On either side of the three shrines pictures stand two statues of Hatshepsut in the form of Osiris. And later on in the same scene, the pharaoh steers a boat towards Deir el-Bahari. This is interpreted as the living king Thutmose III, who's steering the boat containing the sacred emblems of Hatshepsut towards her mortuary temple Djeser-Djeseru, therefore officiating her movement from the living into the realm of the underworld and becoming a deity. If this interpretation is correct, this relief is carved under the reign of Thutmose III, after the death of Hatshepsut. The inscription found at this scene makes sense in this interpretation as well. So the inscription states the following: "The good god, lady of the two lands, daughter of Ra, Hatshepsut." So the reliefs in this particular chapel have helped archaeologists tremendously in helping understand how obelisks were transported from the quarry in Aswan to the Temple of Karnak and other places. Because one relief shows two obelisks tied to sledges and towed on a sycamore wood barge towards Thebes, modern-day Luxor, by a fleet of 27 boats powered by 850 oarsmen. The larger obelisks commemorated Hatshepsut's Hatshepsut festival, which occurred in her 16th year as pharaoh. She is then depicted presenting the obelisks as a dedication to Amun. The Speos Artemidos, or otherwise known as the Cave of Artemis, is a temple dedicated to the lioness goddess of war Pakhet, built by the orders of Hatshepsut. Located in the Beni Hassan cemetery in the governorate of Alminia, the temple is cut from the living rock cliff on the eastern side of the Nile, composed of two chambers which are connected by a short passageway. It has an architrave which bears a long dedicatory text with Hatshepsut's famous denunciation of the Asian Hyksos. The outer portico used to house 8 stone columns in 2 rows, of which only 3 of the 4 forming the facade remain relatively intact in modern times. The other 4 internal pillars have completely disappeared. The rock face above the outer pillars is dressed and inscribed with text bearing Hatshepsut's name. All inscriptions bearing her name inside have been defaced and replaced with the name of Seti I. When her 16th year as pharaoh was nearing, she ordered the construction of 2 more obelisks to celebrate this occasion. But one of the 2 obelisks broke during construction and a third had to be constructed to replace it. This broken obelisk still lies in its quarry site in Aswan, where it is now known as the unfinished obelisk, and proves evidence as to how obelisks were quarried. I've actually seen it with my own eyes back in 2022, and it's incredible, it's massive. This unfinished obelisk is the largest known ancient obelisk, being nearly 1/3 larger than any ancient obelisk ever erected. It's also very important to note that Hatshepsut was not unique in taking the title of king as a woman. Sobekneferu, ruling 6 dynasties prior to Hatshepsut, did the same, and it seems that Khentkaus I, some 10 dynasties earlier, did the same as well. But what was different between these queens and Hatshepsut is that Hatshepsut was well trained in her duties as the daughter of the pharaoh. During her father's reign, she held the powerful office of God's wife, and she was a strong queen to her husband and well experienced in the administration of her kingdom by the time that she became pharaoh. So up until her death, there are no indications of challenges made to her leadership by her co-regent Thutmose III, as he remained quite amicably the head of her powerful army. He could have overthrown her at any time as a usurper if he had pleased to do so, which would grant him his rightful place as pharaoh. But he actually did not do this. Hatshepsut died in her early 50s, around the 16th of January in 1458 BCE, as recorded on a single stele erected at Armant, which is located some 12 miles south of Luxor. Hatshepsut's reign over Egypt lasted 21 years and 9 months. No mention of the cause of her death has survived. But in June of 2007, a discovery was made in the Valley of the Kings. A mummy was discovered in the tomb of Hatshepsut's royal nurse, Sitre'in. A tooth fragment was located in one of the jars of organs and was used to help identify the body to be that of Hatshepsut. If this identification is correct, the medical evidence indicates that she suffered from diabetes and eventually died of bone cancer, which had spread through her body while she was in her 50s. However, in 2011, the tooth was identified as a molar from a lower jaw, whereas the mummy was missing a molar from the upper jaw, casting doubt on this identification. It may very well not have been a tooth from Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut had prepared a tomb in KV 20 for herself and her father Thutmose I, and after she died, she was laid to rest with her father, who was removed from his original tomb and placed there. However, during the reign of Thutmose III, most likely in the co-regency with his son Amenhotep II, the mummies of both Thutmose I and Hatshepsut have been replaced. Tomb KV 38 now housed Thutmose I, including new burial equipment. It was most likely around this time that Hatshepsut's mummy was placed in the tomb of her royal nurse KV 60. The erasure of her name and statues almost caused her to disappear completely from Egypt's archaeological and written records. It's called the Hatshepsut problem, and it became a major issue in the late 19th and early 20th century Egyptology. So the Hatshepsut problem created many feuds between Egyptologists, as this problem was highly controversial and many Egyptologists were not ready to believe a female could have been pharaoh. This problem thankfully was mostly cleared in the late 20th and early 21st century, when more information about her and her reign were uncovered. So in 2006, a foundation deposit including 9 golden cartouches with both the names of Hatshepsut and Thutmose III in Karnak were discovered, showing that together they've done a foundation ritual at a monument in Karnak. I've seen many conflicting statements in different places that state that after the death of Hatshepsut, it was her stepson and nephew Thutmose III who had her erased from history and demolished many of her works. But the Red Chapel shows that this might not be the case at all, as well as this foundation ritual that we found evidence of. You don't do a ritual together if you hate each other's guts. The Red Chapel clearly shows that Thutmose III continued working on buildings that she constructed. He is even depicted as following her restoration works on a detail of the wall in the Red Chapel. This indicates that it was not him defacing and erasing her from history, that it might have been one of his successors that erased her cartouches and left his name. It also would be highly unlikely for Thutmose III to resent his stepmother and aunt, especially since she gave him full control of the armies, because she thought that that was a man's job. And you know, full control over the armies means that you are in a place of power. There has never been any evidence to indicate that he tried to claim the throne during her reign, and even after her death, Thutmose III kept her administrative and religious leaders in his royal court. And another piece of evidence to support this is the fact that Thutmose III had built his mortuary temple directly next to that of Hatshepsut. If he held a grudge against her, he would never have done this. And lastly, after Thutmose III died, his mummy was placed in the cache above the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, where his mummy was discovered in 1881. So it seems that the destruction of Hatshepsut's work started after Thutmose III's remaining son Amenhotep II, of a lesser wife, became co-regent to him in his old age. This theory is strengthened by the fact that Amenhotep II didn't have a strong claim to the throne, being the son of a lesser wife, and the fact that he claimed to have built many items and monuments that he had defaced. We do know that Seti I erased cartouches of Hatshepsut at Speos Artemidos and had replaced it with his own cartouche as well. We don't know if Seti I did this to deface and erase her, or if he tried to steal the glory of the construction of this temple. Hatshepsut was a special woman, a great leader and an incredible pharaoh. Researching her life, the buildings she had ordered to be constructed, the renovations that she had carried out, and the way she depicted herself showed that she was a person beyond limits. She had the knowledge and the intelligence to solidify her claim to the throne. During her reign, Egypt became prosperous and peaceful, with magnificent art and incredibly ambitious building projects. History still remembers her as one of the most successful ancient Egyptian rulers. She couldn't be erased. She was a grand ruler, and in ancient Egypt, just like modern times, you can never keep a great woman down. Hatshepsut's legacy is important for anyone who feels powerless in society. She sure began life with advantages, but she refused the traditional role assigned to women and even discarded her parents in order to become who she truly was, the daughter of Amun, Pharaoh of Egypt. I really loved taking a deep dive into such a unique life and will continue doing so for other queens of ancient times, even if they did take on the traditional roles. So leave a comment down below if you want to learn more about the queens of ancient times, and let me know what you thought of the life of Hatshepsut and the research that I've done in the video I created. And yeah, comments down below. I would love to see your thoughts, and I'm just curious. Please share with me. And don't forget to scan the QR code or click the link in the description and use the code Kaylee25 to get 25% off of a very special gift for Mother's Day. And if you enjoyed watching, then don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to see more of these kind of videos, and click that bell icon if you want to be notified whenever I upload. And if you haven't seen my previous videos yet, then don't make me cry into a corner, but click the card in the upper right corner, and you can click links in the description down below, or click a video in the end card. And I would like to say a massive thank you to all my patrons and my channel members. Thank you so much for supporting me. I'm currently a little bit in the middle of a health scare, and that's going to take at least another month for me to find out kinda what it is. Probably going to take longer, and I'm also going to the neurologist for my migraines. And yeah, physically, not doing too great. Mentally, I'm just coping. I'm just trying to get by. But videos need to be made, bills need to be paid, and we will see how everything goes. I just hope I can continue making these videos for you guys. I love doing it. We will see. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.